Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. As you can probably gather, I'm going to be talking about stoves again today. It's another one of those silly videos where I imagine that I don't have any of these stoves, and if I could only have one, which camping stove would I buy? So over the years I've used many different types of stove, from wood burning stoves, solid fuel tab stoves, loads and loads of different alcohol stoves, and the most popular of them all is probably the gas canister stove. I have had a lot more than this actually, but as you can see from the table, they all come in different shapes and sizes, and they also have different price brackets too. The biggest differences though are the fuel types that they use. I'm not going to go into them all in great detail, as I've probably done a video of all of these bits of kit somewhere. I will drop links in the description below if you want to see any of those. So I'll start off the chat with wood stoves. Wood stoves are great because they've got a pretty much endless supply of fuel. Again, they come in different sizes, shapes and budgets. This one's quite expensive, but I have used cheaper models like the Lixada. This one is obviously more durable. But at the end of the day, some of the cheaper models have worked perfectly fine for me. Wood gas stoves are also great and they're very efficient. Next stove I'll quickly touch on is the alcohol stove. So the one that I've used the most of is probably the Trangia. This is the 27 model, I think. There's a variety of different pot supports for these, so this is just a cheap one from Amazon, but you can also get the more expensive Trangia Triangle, which is brilliant by the way. And another great thing about these is the fuel is very cheap, and you can pick it up from most hardware stores and even some supermarkets and corner shops. Alcohol stoves are very simple. At the end of the day, it's just a small bucket that you fill up with some kind of fuel and light it. There's very little that can go wrong with them. However, you do need to be careful if you're using them near your tent, because if you knock them over, unless it's something like this one which has got a gauze and a mesh inside it, and which soaks up the alcohol, because if you were to knock this over anywhere near your tent, the whole thing could go up in flames in no time, and then you're in a bit of a pickle. The alcohol that I use, I take in one of these little Nalgene bottles. I use bioethanol. I get it from B&Q, that's a hardware store in the UK. It's about £8 for 2 litres. The next type of stove I use is a canister stove. There's two types of these really. So this one is just the simple screw-on type. This is the MSR Pocket Rocket. So this just screws on top of the gas canister. You turn on the valve, light the stove, and then you're away. These again, there's very little that can go wrong with them, and they come in different shapes, sizes and budgets. This is the smallest one that I have of this type. This is the BRS 3000. I think this is titanium, weighs about same as a ladybird, I think. Very small, not as efficient as the Pocket Rocket, but it's great for a backup in your pack, or if you're going ultra lightweight when it comes to your backpacking. Again, something like this, just screw onto the canister and away you go. So one thing to bear in mind if you're using this kind of stove and alcohol stoves is that you probably need some kind of windshield. I haven't brought one with me today, but if you get a lot of wind, it will blow the flame away from your pot, so you really want the heat to be protected, concentrated around your pot. That will reduce boil times, keep the efficiency up on your stove. So next up, we've got the integrated stove system. So you've seen me using this a hell of a lot lately. This is the Jetboil. I've used a number of different types of these. Basically the stove, the pot, you can usually fit a canister inside, pot supports, everything goes inside here. Really compact units, but these tend to be a lot heavier than if you want something, say the Stormin Norman Co, which is a fraction of the weight of one of these. But these boil really fast, so if time is of the essence, then something like this would be great. So some of these stoves can be quite expensive. So for example, Soto Windmaster, I think this is 40 to 50 quid, can't remember off the top of my head. This is just like one of these canister stoves. So this one's about £30, the MSL Pocket Rocket, which again is not that cheap. But if you're just starting out, you can get something like this, which is just a cheap version of one really. I think these are made in China though, so if you're not into your Chinese goods at the moment, you might want to avoid this, but you know, it works perfectly fine. You'd screw this onto your canister. This one's even got a piezo igniter on it, so turn it on and there we go. And this one here is only about 7 or 8 quid, whereas that one's 30. Is there a lot of difference? Well, there is in performance and a little bit on efficiency, but if you're not splitting hairs, then maybe look at something like this. Alcohol stoves are probably the cheapest because you can just make them yourself. This one here, as you can see, is just made from a tonic water can. I didn't make this myself. This was bought from the late Stormin Norman. But there's loads of tutorials on the internet on how to make these. And the penny stove is a great little project for, you know, for getting your kids involved. If you're into camping and stuff like that, you must have had a go at making a penny stove at some time. If you haven't, I recommend you have a go at it. It's really easy to do. And then you've got the most expensive kind of stoves, which is the Jetboil. This is anywhere between 100, 150 quid, something like that, depending where you go. Is it worth the money? I like it, so to me it's worth the money. But you know, I wouldn't recommend this to everybody. If you're only going every now and again camping, this is probably a bit of overkill when you can get away with something like this. Right, before I go into choosing which one of these stoves that I would have if I could only have one, I'm going to narrow the list down a little bit because some of these, they're not going to make the top 4, and I'll quickly explain why. But before we move on, drop me a comment below, let me know what your favourite stove is and why. I'd be really interested to hear your views, and if you've got any of the stoves that I've got on show today, let me know what you think of them. So the BRS stove is quite cheap, probably 10, 15 quid, I don't know exactly anymore. But for me, it wasn't very reliable, wasn't very efficient. So for that reason, I'm going to discount this particular one. Next up is the Appalachian Evernew stove. So this one is like a multi-fuel stove, so I can use this as a little tiny wood stove, and there's also an alcohol stove with it, which isn't too bad, the alcohol stove. This is ideal if you're in a pinch, so you could, little grill pan here. This doubles up as a little wood stove where you just feed wood into it, put your pot on and cook that way if you wanted, but it's too minute and it's incredibly expensive for what it is. This is over £100 for this kit, and it really isn't worth the money. One that I regret buying. So that one can go away for now. So next up, these are great if you're just starting out, but they are quite dirty. So it is a gel fuel stove. So this is from Fire Dragon, BCB I think make it. These make the stoves for the military. So basically you'd put the stove, basically you'd put the gel fuel in there, take it out of the wrapper, light it, and then you would put your pot on top of the stove and boil your water or cook your food. But they do produce quite a lot of soot, so you get that black stuff all over the bottom of your pot. So it's quite messy for me, so I'm not going to bother with that, even though it's only about a £5 for the whole thing, which is great value. What else? This one was a little bit of a tougher call. I was going to choose between the Soto Windmaster and the MSL Pocket Rocket. Overall, the Pocket Rocket has been a better stove for me. I have done a test with the Windmaster, the Pocket Rocket and the Jetboil, and this actually performed the worst of the lot, I think. Although it is good in the wind because it has a low height on here. I do prefer the Pocket Rocket, so this one is going to one side and this will make my shortlist. Wood stoves. So I've used these quite a lot and they are great if you're doing some woodland camping. but most of my camping these days is up in the hills and mountains, so these are not ideal at all. So there's no wood stoves going to make my shortlist, even though the fuel is free. I'm going to discard this cheap stove just because I have got better ones here. So this stove is great for beginners, but it's not for me. So that leaves me here with my final 4 stoves, I believe it is. So let's get them lined up. So first is the Pocket Rocket 2. This is so easy to use. Turn it on, boils your water really quickly. It's got a decent simmer control actually, and these 3 little blades here are great for keeping it lit even when it gets quite windy. It weighs virtually nothing and it's at a decent price at under 30 quid, so this is a well worthy contender on my short list of stoves. A big thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. So in the wilderness of online content, there's lots of websites out there that take your data without you even knowing it. But by using a virtual private network like Surfshark VPN, you can stop these websites from tracking your data and then sending you targeted adverts, etc. Another cool thing is Surfshark's HackLock ID protection, where you will get alerted when some nasty piece of work tries to log into your email or similar accounts. But one of my favourite features about Surfshark is that I can view content that's not yet available in the UK. I'm a huge fan of the series Blacklist, and they're not all yet available here in the UK, but I just log in with Surfshark, pick a server over in the USA. For some reason I tend to pick Chicago, and then bingo, I can stream the latest episodes right to all my devices. I also find it works great for certain sporting events. So if you want both protection of your data and freedom to watch content online, then click the link in the description below and use the promo code Paul Messner. It not only gives you a whopping 83% off the regular price, but you also get 3 months free. Surfshark do offer a full 30-day guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out for yourself. So once again, big thank you to Surfshark. Next up, we have the Trangia mini burner. I do really like this stove. It's so versatile. I can use it with many aftermarket pots. Just let me move this a minute so you can see the stove. This little pot support just sits on top, however it doesn't allow you to put the simmering on, whereas if you're using the Trangia triangle, put the stove in here, you can still fit the simmering onto the stove then. So if you want to control your temperature a little bit more, it gives you a lot more control for if you're cooking more delicate foods. One issue with the Trangia triangle though is that it's not great for taking smaller diameter pots. These 3 supports here are great for frying pans or a kettle. So I have this aftermarket custom made ring here, which was made by Alan. Thank you, Alan. And that just fits over the top here. And this allows me to put small pots on, no bother at all. You can also pick up the whole stove now. Well, be careful though, this does get a little bit warm sometimes. And it's also very stable, so the chances of you knocking over your alcohol pot are drastically reduced. So this stove has worked for me in all different temperatures. So when it's really cold, below freezing, I just make a little wick out of tissue paper. So I just roll it up really tight, like that. Drop that into the stove, and then when you light the wick, the stove burns really easily, even when your alcohol is freezing cold. Putting the stove out is straightforward too. You just take the simmering, close it off, drop it on top, and that extinguishes the flame. So next up on the list for me is the Storming Norman Cone. This weighs literally nothing. So it's just a cone which rolls up and fits inside your pot. The stove is just a simple alcohol burner. That goes in as well, normally with something to stop it rattling around. And this probably weighs about 100 grams, something like that. I don't know. I've stopped weighing stuff now. I realised that I'm carrying a bit too much timber to be worrying about a few grams on my stove. So putting it together, you just interlink these leaves. Your alcohol goes into the stove. Only put a little tiny bit in. Light the stove. Put the cone over the top of it. So that gives you full wind protection as well. And that just slots inside the cone. And it gives you the perfect height from flame to pot. I'm going to put that out as well. Just smother the flame. Be careful if these have been burning for a while, because they can get very hot. This little stove is great if you just want to boil water. Not brilliant if you want to put something like a frying pan on, because it just doesn't work right. As I've said, the fuel is cheap as chips, and I like that it all packs inside a very small pot. Another worthy contender on the shortlist. Last one on the shortlist for me, the Jetboil Minimo. This is my current go-to stove and I love it. Everything fits in this pot, apart from the gas canister. I can actually fit a small one of these canisters in if I remove the frying pan support. Comes in this little bag, as you've probably seen before. The stove part just screws onto the canister. This again has an igniter built into it, so you just turn the valve. Stove lights really easily. I would recommend with all stoves that you take a spare lighter or a ferro rod as well, just in case this ignition system was to ever fail. You can still light it then with a lighter. And then once your stove is lit, your pot just fits on top. Now, one of the great features about this kind of stove, it has a heat exchanger built into the bottom of the pot. So this makes the stoves really efficient. Boil times are rapid. It's also got an insulation sleeve around it, so this also keeps the heat in. Lid as well. All round brilliant bit of kit for me. It does come with an additional pan support, so you can get away without using this pot. This goes on top here, and then your frying pan or saucepan or whatever it is goes on top there, and you just cook as normal. The simmer control on this stove is really fine and accurate, so it's great for cooking omelettes, those kind of things. I did do a video a few weeks ago about a cheaper version of these, comparing the two together, and to be fair, there's not a huge amount of difference between them. So if you're just getting into backpacking and camping and you want something that's not quite as expensive as this, then I'd maybe look at that video and look at the cheaper versions of the Jetboil, because you might find something that is perfect for your use. However, I can't recommend this enough, even though it is very expensive. So let's get this packed away and I'll pick a winner, shall I? So let's narrow this down a little bit, shall we? The first one of these four that I'm going to discount is the Storming Cone. Although it's a brilliant bit of kit, it's a little bit of a one-trick pony for me, as in it's just great for boiling water. It's very lightweight, very compact, and if I'm eating dehydrated meals, then this is the perfect stove for that situation. However, if I want to go cooking steak and asparagus or salmon fillets, then this isn't the right stove for that application. Can't control the temperature, can't really put a frying pan on it, so for that reason I'm going to discount that particular one. Next up, I'm going to reluctantly discount the Pocket Rocket 2. Again, brilliant lightweight stove. I do really like this. I've used it many times, and it can do pretty much everything that I want it to do. It's not quite as efficient as the Jetboil, but that is it. Weighs virtually nothing, packs a lot smaller. However, this has got the pot included, but this can fit in to tiny little pots if I need it to. But it's personal preference, and I prefer the Jetboil gas stove over the Pocket Rocket 2. So this is it, pot final. Which one of these would I choose if I could only have the one? Well, my favourite stove is the Jetboil Minimo. However, it is not the stove that I would choose. I would choose the Trangia with the Trangia triangle. The Jetboil is great, very expensive. There are things on here that could break. The gas that you have to use is also expensive, and you can't get it everywhere. So if you're out on a Sunday evening and you need a gas canister, you just can't pick one of these up. It's quite bulky, and it is meant for this one pot really. Although the Jetboil frying pan that I've also got is a brilliant bit of kit and works with this really well. But that makes it quite a large package. But the main factor for not choosing this one would be the price. That leaves me with the winner, the Trangia 27 burner. So I've had this thing for years. The only thing that I've ever had to replace on it is this little rubber seal that goes inside. And these are really expensive at about £1.50. You can also store your fuel inside it, but I always take a little bottle of bioethanol with me. And if I ever run out, you can pick up methylated spirits or ethanol from most filling stations, corner shops, pretty much anywhere, anytime. The stove is pretty much indestructible. I reckon I could stand on that and it wouldn't break. If I drop it, it's not going to break. I have heard of instances where people have had the solder start leaking around here, so they don't store their fuel in theirs, but I've never had any issues with mine. One downside to this stove is that you can't just put your pot directly on top. You do need some kind of support with it. So you can pick up something like this. This is only about £4 or £5 from Amazon, and that allows you to put your pot on top. You will probably need some kind of windshield. I've just made one out of foil. Which goes around your pot very easily. But you can buy them for under a tenner if you don't want to make one yourself. The boil times on these are pretty slow, but I'm never in any rush. I'm there to enjoy the views, the scenery, and if it takes a few minutes longer to boil my water, then I'm not really bothered. This burner is about £15. You can get copies of them which are cheaper, but I say for that money, buy the original. It comes with a simmer ring as well, so you can vary the height of the flame, which gives you decent temperature control, so you can still get away with cooking more delicate items if you want to. I definitely recommend you checking out alcohol stoves, but be very careful if you've never used one before, because this stuff is lethal if you spill it. A knocked over alcohol pot, a flame and a tent are three things that don't mix. I do really like the Trangia triangle. I do wish that they'd made something to support smaller pots, but you can come up with something yourself. This one was made for me, but you could just put a couple of tent pegs over the sides here like that, and then rest your pot on top of the tent pegs, and it works perfectly fine. I've done that many times. The great thing about this, without dropping it, is that it folds perfectly flat. Comes with a little bag. So this can go in any little sleeve in your rucksack. Could also put that in there if you want, but I tend to keep this either in my pot or in a plastic bag just in case it ever leaked. That's it for this video, my two favourite stoves. This one gets used the most at the minute and it's probably my favourite, but the Trangia, so if I could only have one, it would have to be this. It's great value for money, compact, reliable, brilliant bit of kit. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.